All right, I've got a special guest today, Mr. Jim Sheils, and he is going to tell us his journey about build to rent, but also he's got some really cool stuff about people out there, parents out there wanting to know how to balance the family life, running a business, running a practice, dealing with kids, staying married. Really excited to have him on the show. So welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jeff. Good to be here.
So a lot of our listeners, they're busy high income professionals, doctors, dentists, entrepreneurs. They want to get interested in
Yep.
investing in real estate. But a lot of them say, I don't have the time, or maybe I don't have the knowledge or whatever. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started, and then we'll kind of get into what you're currently doing now. How did you get started in real estate?
Yeah, I got started 25 years ago, and I'd been looking to go into some sort of entrepreneurship, and I kept coming back to that fact that and you can Google it. 8 out of 10 millionaires in the U.S. made their money in real estate, and I like that, and I like the tangibility. I grew up in North Jersey, right near Wall Street. I didn't like that scene. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't like the levers. I felt in real estate I could pull levers that I
Hmm.
had control over that I didn't with stocks or other such things. And there's obviously many ways to make wealth, but for me, I took the real estate path. And it all started with that first offer on 432 North M Street 25 years ago in Lompoc, California, the classic fixer upper. And unlike most people, I got lucky. I hit a home run. I mean, an absolute home run on the first deal I ever did, following some simple principles. And within a few years, I was working with other investors. But about 10 years ago, Jeff, we really switched our model. And that's when my wealth and the wealth of my clients started to take a different trajectory. I had always worked in old properties, fixing up old properties like the shows talk about and renting them out. It's not quite as glamorous as you say. And unlike your medical professionals, and as you know, we met through other professionals that help doctors, I had a lot of time. I was unmarried. I was young. I had more time than I did money. So people with money would come to me to do the work because I did have a good expertise. But now we found that people are even busier now than they were 25 years ago. I mean, the technology's been great, but people are busier. We've had crazy times, and we found that stopping old construction properties and going to new construction was a game changer for us, for our clients, for the tenants, for the overall results. And that's been the biggest part of my journey, is the first 15 years being that rehabber by trade, doing thousands of rehabs. But going into new construction was a realm I never thought I would enter, but it served me in growing my wealth and my clients' wealth exponentially more than my old model ever could.
So for that first rental that you had mentioned, was that maybe, were you in college or were you out of college? Had you
No,
worked a
no,
while?
I am 50 now. So I've
Okay.
hit the 50. I was 24 years old buying that first property. Saved
So
my
what
down.
were you doing before that? What type of work?
You know, before I went full time into real estate, I had two main jobs. I was in pharmaceutical advertising,
Okay.
supporting you guys. No offense, but there was nothing more boring for me than creating Slim Jims and pamphlets for irregular bowel syndrome. It just wasn't my thing. And after a short stint in that, Jeff, I went into sales. And it was actually, I did database sales, and I knew very little about real estate. And it was actually a database company that sold foreclosure research listings
Okay.
about foreclosures all over the US. And I had to say, well, what's a foreclosure? And how does that work? But that's how I really started to say, wait a minute, you can buy this house for how much? And that opened my eyes. And so that was I had about 2 to 3 years in corporate America before I, really took the leap, and I've never looked
So
back.
that information about the foreclosure, would you say that's what sparked your interest or got you going in that real estate direction?
It was one of the things. I was very hungry for knowledge after I got out of college. I knew I wanted to go into entrepreneurship, so I was looking into. I mean, you name it, franchises, business ventures, all sorts of things, and I kept coming back to real estate. It just made sense to me. Some things are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You do that, rehab it this way, grab a second mortgage, dump it into this. I just sometimes you just get something. And that's how I felt about real estate. So it was a combination of what I kept finding to learn. And then when I was actually seeing actual houses for sale through foreclosures and saying, wait a minute, you can buy a house, and this was 25 years ago, for 80,000, where properties on the same street are selling for 135. I'm confused.
Hmm.
I'm confused. How does that can't be real? But sure enough, it was real.
Well, can you explain? We mentioned a little bit build to rent model. Some people may not be familiar with that. So can you explain a little bit about what that means and why it's actually become such a big part of your portfolio?
Yeah, so build to rent is just a way to say turnkey real estate that's new construction. That's really what it is. You've heard about these turnkey real estate groups out there that rehab old homes, and you can buy a property from them, and maybe they'll manage it, maybe they won't. And we used to do that, and we made great money for us and our clients. However, old homes have what I call the 3 year curse. And that means after 3 years, even if you do a new roof, heating, cooling, plumbing, update, electric, bath, everything, you start to have more maintenance and repairs. It just is. And I own older homes, but that's the way it is. And people, what we've learned, Jeff, is they're wanting to buy back their time. They're not wanting involvement. They're wanting exposure to real estate, but they don't want this involvement. They don't want constant turnover. And the new construction model, which we only work in now, we build new from scratch in high growth areas. And that has certain advantages where now you have less maintenance and repairs, less tenant turnover, better longevity. Everyone talks about one of the most proven strategies for wealth in first world countries is buying property, rental property in good areas and holding it long term. It's that
Hmm.
simple. It's one of the most proven methods. But in order to hold a property long term, you need a property that's in a good area, in good condition, that doesn't drown you in maintenance and repairs and turnovers as you're growing through the cycles. And the new construction did that. So what we do is we build new construction properties, all residential. That could be a single family, a duplex, or a quad in high growth markets in Florida. We're in about a dozen markets in Florida. These markets are always experiencing population growth, good economic growth, a good affordability level, so it's not overpriced. There's something desirable drawing them to the area, and there's healthy supply and demand. Like, for example, work with a lot of doctors buying with us down in Southwest Florida now. Southwest Florida had the largest growth during the pandemic. And
Hmm.
even before the pandemic started, the municipality there had released a report showing they were 3 years behind on needed rental inventory at that time. So these are the things that we constantly look for. And then to help bring it into place, we've tried to really incorporate, as I told you, there are investments that I love, like RV resorts, but we really wanted to fine tune this model for us and our clients. So now not only do we build the new properties in these areas that we've identified, we have management already in place. We provide in-house financing. Most people right now, they go to get a loan on a duplex, let's say, they're locking in at 6.75. Right now, we're locking our investors in at 3.75. We also help bring in the insurance. So people say, oh, it's impossible to get insurance in Florida and it's high priced. Not our experience. And because of the volume that we do, the fact that we do new construction. So all the pieces, Jeff, that you would have to figure out on your own, we're trying to bring those in so you can step in, grab onto our coattails of blood, sweat, and tears and build a portfolio in an easier, faster, and more safe fashion with the better results. That's how our build to rent model works. And we're not only doing it for individual investors, we've also done it for some of the biggest institutions. And there's a reason why these institutions are raising money from us to go out and buy workforce housing like we built, because they believe in it. And I believe you should invest in funds and syndications. I do myself. But owning your own property, direct property ownership, is still the most proven way to get the highest returns.
Our company, my business partner and I, we own over 25 RV parks, and then I have another business partner, and we own 8 mobile home parks. And I didn't really know until I got into that sector how many people don't want to own anything. They want to rent.
Yep.
They want the affordable housing, and they want to be mobile. A lot of
Yep.
times they want to be mobile.
Yep.
So are these some of the reasons why you feel that the build to rent model, let's say versus the quote traditional go buy a house and and rent it out long term, rent it out sort of thing, or just something like that. Are these the benefits that you're seeing?
It is. The marketing behind the American dream of owning a home has changed. I've had
Hmm.
conversations with nieces and nephews who are, oh, I don't want to get stuck with a house. And I say, have you met me? Have we not had conversation? I mean, I have a totally different outlook, and that's fine. Everyone has differing opinions. But some people, like you said, they want to be mobile. They feel like it's holding them down. They'd rather just rent. They're concerned. Some people were still scarred from 2008. Other people just believe it's an anchor instead of a flotation device. And so that mindset shift is an advantage to guys like you and I, or investors that we work with, because people say, I want a rental where I'm not responsible for anything except for the rent. They don't want to do maintenance, repairs, have to buy it, have to sell it, right? And
Yeah.
that is fulfilling a need to a new market that we're both experiencing.
Yeah, and I was doing some financial coaching for a new dentist lately. He'd only been out for a year, and we started talking about his debt. And he owned a little over $1 million, like a practice loan. And he had 3 kids, like 10, 8, and 6. His wife didn't work. He only been out for a year. So he had like a $1.2 million practice loan, and he owed over $1 million on his house. And it's just people
Wow.
like that. I'm just like, man, if you could have just rented
Yep.
and gotten out of some of that debt, and it's just it's mind boggling. So I hope more and more people, and I understand we go to school a long time. We feel like we quote deserve it. We're entitled to having the house and all that. But man, you get behind the 8 ball like that, it's hard to dig out from under that. Would you
Very.
agree?
Oh, absolutely. And look, doctors and dentists, they do. You guys go to school longer. It's tougher. There's a reason why, people people don't do what you do, and you're rewarded with normally a higher wage. We work with a lot of doctor investors. However, it was actually a doctor friend of mine said, I've had to teach these young doctors, you can have everything you want, you just can't have it right now. And that always hit me. I think it's for all investors, but especially that. Yeah, you've worked hard, you've gone through intern and everything, and so you want it now. But as you said, Jeff, those first five
Yeah.
years of
Uh,
planting the seed instead of eating your seed capital is detrimental. It's good that you're
mhm.
coaching on this, because I've seen it go the right way and the wrong way over the last 25 years.
Occasionally I have people reach out to me and they go, Jeff, I bought a piece of property. I bought some land, or maybe they inherited some land. And a lot of times they're asking me about, what do you think about putting a mobile home park or an RV park on it? Well, with build to rent model, obviously you're having to look at land and stuff like that. So whenever you're searching maybe for land to do the build to rent, what are some of the critical factors that go into this?
Well, there's two ways to buy land. There's
Hmm.
there's an easier way where we find infill lots, and that's lots where it's individual lots in an already existing neighborhood. They are pretty much ready to go. You can get those approved with plans in a short amount of time and start building. Right? Those can be great. We like infill lots, and
Hmm.
I was always taught as an investor the old style way. Hey, go into a neighborhood where there's a mixture of homeowners and renters, and we can do that in those types of really solid markets near the median price to do that. And that's one way we buy. The other way we buy is like you're talking about, and that's large tracts of land. And the biggest thing I can say to anyone, from building the RV resort to doing, lots of different development projects, it is very, very, very different than buying an old house, fixing it up, and selling it. You better be ready. It's not 90 days or 120 days. You're talking
Hmm.
2+ years. And where I see, Jeff, people getting confused, you got to really do, and I talk about this in the book we just released, you got to do your due diligence. You have to allot for time. If you're saying, oh, yeah, we're going to have this big thing divided up and approved in the next 4 to 6 months, like you are setting yourself up for a lot of pain and negativity in your profits, in your stress levels, because it just doesn't work that way. So with the new construction model, if you're going to go into it, you can start with infill lots, which can be a great way, and you can go to bigger tracts of land, and those can be great. We like those because we can do a big 1,000 lot development. It's going to take a few years. We can take some of our risk off the table by selling some of the lots to national home builders, so that they're going to build nice, big, pretty houses around us, and we keep a percentage of them for our build to rent homes as well. There's lots of things you can do, but know that it takes time, and it is cash intensive. And so you got to have holding power if you're going to do some of these bigger tracks.
So can you just to very simple terms, can you walk us through the process from acquiring the land all the way to completing the build?
Yeah, it would probably be too long to go over today, Jeff, but just know sometimes you can have land at the starting point where you're starting to, we have 15-person team for off markets land acquisition. So they are constantly making offers, contacting owners. Something that might fit the buy box then has to go to our head of land development, and you have to start doing numbers on it. You can put a property under contract, and it could take 6 months of due diligence
Mm.
of whether it's going to work or not. And after that, then you have to start to find out what can you get approved to actually go on that land. It's great if you can just say in your mind, I'm going to put 50 quads on this property. Are you going to get that approved? You
Hmm.
got to really have someone who knows zoning and can get those approval processes done. And then there comes the thing of funding the land. I'm sure you've seen this, Jeff. We always, until we were partially acquired by Sumitomo Forestry, we always raised our own land funds because the banks don't like land, right? They want a different stage of the game. So you're probably going to have to bring in your own financing to acquire that land, and go through the purchase. Then you have to start to go through all the land development, right? The what's
Hmm.
called the horizontal development, which can have a lot of stops in it. There's a lot of approvals that have to go through with the local municipality, and this is all before you can even go to vertical. And as you go into vertical, as you know, Jeff, every step you could try to do one house in some out country nowhere area without going by the book. We could never do that at the size we are. You have so many stops that you have to go through to make sure each part of the house is signed off on correctly. This is where it's so different. So I just always remind people that's kind of the flow of it. And people say, how could it take 2 years? Well, that's how. That's how. And you're probably going to need two types of financing. You're going to have to fund the land either with your own money or raising capital. And
Hmm.
then you usually can get a bank to step in for the vertical as long as you have a strong balance sheet and such. But you're going to need two different sources of financing to get that going.
So if I'm a potential investor and I'm out there and I'm listening to this podcast or I'm researching build to rent and I'm reaching out to people like you or other groups about it, what are some of the questions I should be asking? What are some of the things I should be looking for as a potential investor that wants to get into the build to rent model?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. And the questions that would have been asked 5 years ago are totally different now. So when this really started almost 10 years ago, it was a very basic model of, hey, do you want us to build you a duplex in this area of Ocala, Florida? Great, give us a deposit, we'll build it, and then you close on it in 8 to 10 months. Now, with all the changes, the supply chains, that can be a very dangerous thing. And I always tell people before you sign a pre-construction contract, a good build to rent builder should have inventory completed or near completion. They're building on their own dime already. Your deposit goes towards a property that's almost done or already done, and you can close on it quickly and not go into long escrow periods. That's one thing that I would ask. Also, one of the things, if you're going to buy right now, you want to make sure a builder has strong financials. They're solvent, they're healthy. I've seen a lot of builders through this last um, it wasn't the real estate did well, but it was a downturn in material prices. It really hurt a lot of builders, and then the banks stopped lending. Luckily, we have zero bank debt. Our partner parent company now, Sumitomo, funds 100% of our builds. But some of these builders, they can't get the line. So you want to ask those questions. First of all, how close are the properties to completion? What kind of management is in place, or management can you refer me to if they don't do it? And third, what's your financial position? Are you in any sort of lawsuits right now?
Hmm.
Are you behind on any uh, projects that you've been working on? These are important things to protect you right up front.
So if somebody wants to invest with your company, you know, walk me through that process. Do they have a phone call? Do they
Yeah,
how do they choose their property? What type of returns? Kind of walk me through that process.
yeah. We've tried to make the process as fluid as possible. So if
Hmm.
someone says, we talk after this, Jeff, you say, look, my good friend heard about you guys. He wants to invest. We have a team of 120 plus people. Your first point of contact with us is one of our property counselors. So our property counselors are experienced investors. They've built dozens and dozens of successful portfolios. They're really good at asking the questions, finding out where you're at, what are your goals, are we a good fit for you? We're not a good fit for everybody. It's not, if you're looking to invest $20,000, our minimum investment to start building a portfolio is 80,000. We're not going to take on people and try to force them into something over their head.
Hmm.
Do they have a few hours a month to allocate? Our goal is 2 hours a month to oversee your rental portfolio. But if you're like, I have absolutely no time, we say, well, maybe you just need to go into a silent fund or syndication then. But once we go through these questions and find out their goals, what they want, our property counselor works with them from day one to day 10,000, right? We have clients over a decade now that are working with us and still building properties. And so that's your starting point to review. Where do you want to be? What are your goals? Let's look at some properties. Let's review some performance. Would you like to understand how our financing works? We answer all the questions through our property counselors and what's called our care team. They're kind of our team that onboards all of our investors. We have a little over 1,000 active investors. But the starting point is getting to know, where are you? What do you want to do? And the property counselor will help you build your portfolio. Are you wanting to start with one property or two properties? We have some people coming out of a 1031 exchange from, let's say, the West Coast to Florida. They need to buy 4 properties right away within 6 months. Okay, well, let's back into that. What types of properties? And again, we work within a menu of single family duplexes and quads. All of them have their pluses and others have what the other won't do as well. So we try to really assess, where do you want to go? That's the starting point.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I really appreciate the build to rent and that information. And now we're going to completely shift gears. And actually, it's actually located above your head, the 18 Summers. Because as I mentioned before, many of us we're busy running a business, running a practice. We're trying to stay married. We have kids. I have a 19 and 17-year-old. My wife and I will be empty nesters next year. I'm also 50 like you. I understand all this, and I understand the importance of balancing all these things. So I know you've written a lot about family time and balancing things with 18 Summers. So tell us a little bit about that and how important it is.
Yeah, I just learned years ago, and I have 5 kids ranging from 2 to 21, actually 21 as of today. And so I'm all over the boards now still. I'm far from empty nest, but
I can't imagine having a 2-year-old right now. No
yeah,
offense, no
that
offense.
one untaken. That was a last minute decision of family, and we adopted her at birth. So it's been
Awesome.
quite an adventure, and I better stay young for a while, right?
You better.
But what I've seen, Jeff, and it was kind of sad, whether it was, real estate investing brings in all types, entrepreneurs, that's all they're in, to doctors, dentists, lawyers. Met people of all professions, and we're all looking to have that integration of we got to provide, but we also don't want to miss the moments.
Hmm.
And I believe you can be successful in business and successful at home. And what I was taught many years ago, Jeff, I'm sure you guys had it in some of your training, was bringing that balance of home life in was almost a bad thing. I had some mentors stand up and say, "Hey, put your head down for the next 5 to 10 years, and your family will understand." I think that's terrible advice, horrible advice. The years are not all created equal, and so I am the last person to take away ambition, but we have to have growth along the way, because when we don't, I've seen, and I wrote about this in my book, The Family Board Meeting. Once we start to become delegated out of family life because we're at the practice, or we're handling the investments too much and we're spending no time there, you start to feel like a stranger in your own home. You
Hmm.
start to be viewed as that, as just a roommate or a disciplinarian part-time or an ATM machine. It's very hard on the emotions. And it doesn't matter if you're the toughest lawyer, doctor, entrepreneur, it wears on you.
Hmm.
And the good news is, what I found is, we can kind of protect ourselves from ourselves by setting some simple rhythms and strategies in place, so we don't let our career, our practice, our investments overrun us for the things we got into it the whole point anyway. I mean, most people that I interview say, "Yeah, I wanted to buy all the RV parks so that I'd have something for my family, so that I could buy back my time and I could go where I want to go and be involved with what I want to be involved with." But sometimes we lose that along the way. And what our 18 Summers education movement is about is saying, how do we keep those that are priority in priority position? And we're not unrealistic to say, well, you don't have to work. That's just not realistic. You're going to build a practice, you're going to build a venture of RV resorts or rental properties. You're going to have to put in work. But what we work on at 18 Summers is how do you make the moments? So we have a couple of key rhythms that we've helped hundreds of thousands of families now put into their life to see real results. And that's what our book was about. And that's where I encourage people. You might be feeling completely run over, like, oh my gosh, it's September. I don't feel like I've even seen my family but 1 week this year. All of that can start to slow down and feel regrounded if you just put a few simple strategies and rhythms into place.
Now, you'd mentioned your book, the family board meeting. So tell us a little bit about that, and maybe how you came up with that and how you're actually implementing it.
Yeah, it started out of a need, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're trying to teach something, it usually starts from gross imperfection, which I had running two real estate investment companies, coming out of the '08 meltdown, escaping bankruptcy by the skin of my teeth and protecting my investors, but barely. Like, it was a scary time. And so when you get that kind of fear, then you really get onto the treadmill and say, well, I can't be outrun. I'm going to do this. But you got to be there for your family as well. And so these strategies, like what I started to do with my sons, spending a day with them each quarter without my phone, doing the thing that they wanted to do, was a game changer. And I talk about it. We had some major breakthroughs with my oldest son, and really struggled with a few things from this. I started
Mm-hmm.
to share this at different groups that you and I probably would have met at, and people are going, "Wow, no one's talking about this." It had
Mm-hmm.
such an organic growth to it, Jeff. But how I put it together right now is I speak at different events. I get brought in for workshops for certain leadership groups, financial groups, because they're struggling. And my goal is to get them to have some individual time with each of their children, and have some individual time with each of their spouses. And you would be shocked, Jeff, at how little we put priority and scheduling into one-on-one time with each member in our family. That's the cheat. That's the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
One-to-one time. I say that is the most overlooked yet potent principle that we get overrun on. And I can go into deep principles of the one-to-one principle, or intermittent tech fasting. I'm so glad for technology. How could we have this conversation right now from states apart and communicate and get the message out? But you got to have times of complete and total unavailability. And that's why I teach intermittent tech fasting. There's going to be periods where you are completely and totally unavailable without guilt to your practice, to your investments, and that's okay. And then we also talk about entrepreneurs, professionals, doctors. We can be pretty bullheaded. Certain things don't come easy to us. Apologies,
Mm-hmm.
compliments, and not necessarily sometimes, and they weren't easy for me because I didn't grow up with them. But also because we're moving so fast, we're like, no, you actually think you did apologize. You think you actually did pay attention. You
Mm-hmm.
actually think you were mentally available, and you weren't. So these principles in my book, I've just named a couple of them, help, and are brought together by simple meetings with each of your children, with your whole family, planning adventures and keeping one on the calendar. And then going back to one of the most simple ones, Jeff, date night. I don't miss date night with my wife, even with 5 kids. I mean, for the last one, she was strapped in the sling, coming out to dinner with us, right? Sleeping. And it's scary because people, oh, we're really struggling. My husband is not supporting my practice anymore. It's really driving a wedge in us. And I say, when was the last time you guys were alone on a date? Whew, 8, 9 months ago. I'm going 8, 9 months. You have a chronic condition and you go 8, 9 months and just let it keep going and going, right? My doctor friends know that better than anyone. And so I really try to reground with simple, practical things. And one of the most important, we do it a little differently. We teach a class on it, but how do we really reconnect with our spouse every week on a date? Not talking about the weather or what errands we have to run on Saturday. So we have a simple little format and
Mm-hmm.
scheduling. And I can say that has probably saved thousands of marriages,
That's
including
awesome.
my own.
Yeah, I know that, and you're probably the same way. Whenever you're coaching or teaching people, it's really cool now. I mentioned that young dentist that had the young kids that, you know, we, as you get older, I personally believe that every 5 years, your life completely changes.
I do.
Because if you're speaking to your 10-year-old now, you just said you had from 2 to 21, so you know all of this. But if you're speaking to a 10-year-old now, that conversation is totally different 5
100%.
years later when they're 15, you know? So,
100%.
listening, and I remember back when I got out of practice and I'm thinking, all this stuff, I'm like, look, you got little kids, you're not even considering them or whatever. Let me tell you, my experience, and let me tell you, if I were to go back again, like you're talking about, this is what I would do differently. And yeah, spending that one-on-one time with them. But it changed a little bit because, as it really isn't 18 summers. It's really like 11 or 12 because,
They find
once
friends.
they get to be, teenagers, if you haven't built those bonds, they don't want to be around mom and dad anymore.
Yeah.
They're
No,
driving.
and that's I mean, and I always say, I always joke, if my 7-year-old wants to hang out with me, if my 17-year-old wants to hang out with me more than my 7-year-old, I haven't done something right. Right? We
Right.
want to push from the nest. I still want quality time, but there's something wrong there.
Yep.
At the same time, like you hit the nail on the head there, Jeff, the conversation that I have with my 17-year-old is very different than my 7-year-old. And that's the importance of one on, you got to separate the parts to strengthen the whole.
Hmm.
It's a totally different interaction. And look, big family gatherings are great. I always joke I came from an Irish Catholic family, which means I have like 4,000 cousins. Yeah, the big parties. But real connection, real conversation, getting below the surface occurs in one-on-one interactions where the phone is not in the way.
So if people want to learn more about this concept, this 18 summers, this family board meeting, that sort of thing, you've got some resources out there. Can you tell
Yeah,
the
just go to
listeners?
18summers.com. You can
18.
get some of our free downloads, and also our book is for sale anywhere you can find it. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. The Family Board Meeting hit #1 on Wall Street Journal last year, which we're very proud of. I don't think I'm that great of a writer, Jeff. I just think the message is that important.
Also, I'm going to grab a copy of the book. I'm writing it down right now. And then also, if people want to learn more about potentially investing in the build to rent model, where do they go? How can
Yeah,
they
you
find
can
you?
go to a great starting point is jjplaybook.com. It's something my wife and I wrote with my building partner. It talks about our principles of build to rent, and you can look about our company, Southern Impression Homes. We've built over 10,000 properties, work with thousands of investors, and you might enjoy what we have to offer.
Perfect. Well, I'll put the 18summers.com, the family board meeting, jjplaybook.com. I'll put all the links below this
Excellent.
video. Make it very easy for people to get. So,
Appreciate it.
Jim, I really appreciate everything that you're doing. I appreciate your time today, and look forward to continue hearing great things from you.
You too. Keep up the good work, Jeff. Appreciate it.